Back up. So my name is Susan Blunt, and we are going to start our main session now. I am one of the directors of Neighbors on Call. Becca Zirkin, our other director, is here too. Just a quick catch up for those of you who may be just joining us. It turned out that the House was still in session, and as many times as we've had meeting with our legislators, this is actually the first one where the legislator could not participate because the session was going on. So many thanks to Jennifer Bremer, who jumped in and rescued the story, and I'm sorry I couldn't be in that session too. But it will be recorded, and it was recorded, and we will be putting it up on our website probably sometime tomorrow. All right, so let's start the meeting. Neighbors on Call is an all-volunteer organization. Our primary goal is to elect Democrats to the North Carolina General Assembly. And let me just add that when Representative Everett popped in for just a minute to say, so sorry, he said, I really appreciate all your help to elect more Democrats. That's just what we need. So important goal. Now, right now, we're focused on protecting the Democratic incumbents because we can't afford to lose any seats in the legislature. That means that we got to talk to the voters to increase Senator Batch's and our other legislative friends too, to increase their name recognition and their connection to their constituents. Now, before the redistricting starts, before we even know what the new legislative maps will be. As you probably heard in the breakout session, redistricting will happen soon, sometime after the census data comes in. Every 10 years, when the census is done, the Constitution requires that districts be redrawn. So some of the progress that has been made over the past few years will get changed. So it's an important time for us to be knowledgeable about what's going on. But we're being strategic about paying attention to our incumbents and trying to figure out what the maps could be. That's why we're here tonight to talk to Senator Batch and Senator Crawford about getting us ready for the redraw so we can understand better what might be happening in Wake. And as you'll see in a minute, it has changed a lot over the past decade back and forth. So that's why we're canvassing this weekend with Senator Batch this Saturday in Holly Springs. We hope you'll please join us. You can RSVP on our website at neighborsoncall.org. And if you're new to canvassing, we have an option where you can be a silent canvasser. It works really well. I've done it myself when I was a newbie. And then someone else will do all the talking. You can come. Thank you, Becca, for putting that in the chat. Someone else will do all the talking. You follow along. And our experience has been usually that within a few minutes, the so-called silent partner was chiming right in and supporting the effort. So it's a great way to get over that initial hesitation you may feel. Now, there's another kind of work that happens around elections and the maps, the legislative maps, which is nonpartisan activity with groups like Common Cause and the League of Women Voters. We watch for their calls to action from those organizations and others, like opportunities to lobby or rally at the legislature and to submit public comments, all important things. And we will share those from time to time in our Monday email. But that's not our focus tonight. Sorry, move to my next slide here. Here's a quick status. I'm sorry, the slides are on. I'm so sorry. This problem is from sitting here fiddling with my computer while we were waiting. Here we go. So here's a quick snapshot of where we are right now in the legislature. The supermajority was broken in 2018, which was a good thing. And in 2020, we were able to keep the Republicans from regaining the supermajority.
I don't think we're seeing the slide. At least I'm not seeing the slides.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Thank you.
There we go. Thank you.
Okay, so I was saying this is the status today. The Republicans no longer have the supermajority, but it's perilously close, I'd have to say. You can see that the Republicans are only 2 seats short of the supermajority in the Senate and 3 seats short in the House. They do have the vanilla majority, but not the supermajority. So they're uncomfortably close to regaining the supermajority in 2022. And so that's why we're here tonight. And Becca? Becca?
Muted. We just wanted to take a quick look, and if you were in the earlier session, you already saw this. We're just going to take a real fast look at this. The Wake County House districts, the last 3 elections, all under different maps. And Senator Batch and Senator Crawford will talk more about why and how the maps changed in Wake County, but I just wanted to point out that Senator Batch, who was Representative Batch at the time, flipped 37, House District 37 in 2018 by about 950 votes. But then the lines changed, and just a little, but the district went red in 2020. So you can imagine that we were very, very excited when Governor Cooper appointed Sydney Batch to fill the Senate seat in District 17, Senate District 17, and that Sarah Crawford flipped Senate District 18 in the northern part of the county. That also happened in 2020. So you can see the changes that happened in the Senate across the last 3 elections, and it's really striking how much red has gone to how much blue. And we're going to come back to this slide with the senators in a little bit for them to talk about that more. So we're very excited to have our 2 speakers here with us tonight. Senator Sydney Batch is a family law attorney, a child welfare advocate, and social worker. She was elected to the House in 2018 when she flipped House District 37 and then lost her seat in 2020. And we shed many tears because we had put a lot of hours into knocking doors in her district. And she now is back in the Senate advocating for the needs of families in North Carolina, and we are very grateful. Senator Sarah Crawford was raised in eastern Wake County and represents parts of Wake and Franklin counties, which is to the north. She was elected in 2020 when she flipped that seat, 17, and which overlaps Terrence Everett's district. It lies on top of Terrence Everett's House district. Senator Crawford works with organizations and nonprofits in higher education and health and human services to put families on a path to economic stability and prosperity. And so she continues that work in the legislature, and we are very, very grateful to her for that. Senator Batch, Senator Crawford, welcome, and I am passing it over to you.
Thanks, guys, and thank you for having me here. I'm very fortunate to be able to serve with Senator Crawford. I know before we get going into our conversation, I just want to thank Neighbors on Call again for all of the hours and time and sweat equity that you poured into my race in 2018 and then also in 2020. So I'm very happy to be here in the Senate and to serve with Senator Crawford. I think you guys will find her to be a wonderful and joyful person, and I'm extremely fortunate to be able to serve with her and to have another mom in the legislature because she's got 2 daughters. I have my 2 sons, and we sit in a row with another new legislator in the Senate, and she has 2 sons as well. So we are a rare group of 3 moms who sit on the back row in the Senate together with kids that range between the ages of 5. And then Sarah, your oldest is 12?
Yep, 12.
Yeah,
you got
so we're very fortunate, but it's good to see all of you guys. Thank you so much. Sarah, if you want to say some stuff, say any remarks before we get started.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I know we were all absolutely heartbroken, myself included, when then Representative Batch did not win her seat in November. And it was a tough election for a lot of folks for a lot of different reasons. And I will say, once January came and she got appointed to the Senate, I was no longer sad because we gained such a gem in the state Senate. And I just so enjoy serving with Sydney. She is so smart and so thoughtful, and I learn from her every single day. And I know both from Sydney and from Terrence that Neighbors on Call just does tremendous work. And so I'm just so honored to be with all of you tonight and to know how much good work you put into the 2020 elections and how many folks you helped. So thank you for all of that. And we are looking forward to the conversation this evening.
So Sarah, if you want to start us off, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So Sydney and I are both new to the Senate this year, and I would love folks to hear from you, Sydney. How does being in the Senate feel different than being in the House?
Yeah, well, I think the fact that Terrence wasn't able to be here today is perfect example of how being in the Senate is by far at least better for work-life balance and a schedule, more like work-life management. I don't think any of us really have a whole lot of balance. I know that Sarah and I do not with all of the hats that we wear as we're both working moms. But I think that the biggest difference is that there's a lot more, interestingly enough, congeniality and less partisanship in the Senate from what I can experience in the House. As many of you knew who helped me out in the 2 elections and especially the reelection, the same thing's still happening in the House. Unfortunately, the House will not let any of my legislation through. So I've continued to still, I'm ushering a bill through the Senate that I was presenting with a Republican colleague. And I had Republicans on the bill, but they wouldn't pass it with my name on it. And so I'm helping them usher the legislation that I drafted through because they don't understand this very complex child welfare law bill. But the House made it clear to the Senate that any legislation with my name on it was not going to get passed, right? So imagine a world where like they get everything that they want. And I always teach my kids to be good, like to be good losers. You can't be a good winner unless you're a good loser, but they're just bad winners. I'm like, how is it that you are still mad? Like, what did I do to you? You won. Be happy, move on. But that's not the case. So there's significantly less pettiness that I think that exists in the Senate than the House. And also the structure and the time is very, very different, right? So Sarah and I got out today. We haven't been in session past, I think, 7 o'clock on any day. But the House routinely is in session on hour after hour after hour. They'll be there until 2 or 3. When I was in the House, the longest session we had, we got out at 3:30 in the morning. That doesn't happen in the Senate. So it's a very different chamber. And I think that the members, because it's smaller and more intimate, there's somewhat more of congeniality. Let's be clear. Sarah and I both know there's a lot of politics at play, but I think that our colleagues across the aisle, for the most part, are easier to work with than in the House for sure. So one of the things that has been great with regards to the maps and them changing and other things that have come up is that we have the ability to now have Sarah represent Wake County. And, had I not lost my sleep, her district before was red, but she flipped it. And so one of the questions that I had for you, Sarah, is that, in 2020, you were able to flip the district, right? And it turned blue versus when it was in 2018. So can you explain the results of the Wake County Senate districts and how they changed from 2016 to now, for the 2016, 2018 to now, and especially in particular with your district since it did?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great question. I think we have a slide. I saw it pop up. There we go. It's coming to you. So just to walk you through this, and actually, I want to go all the way back to 2014. So in 2014, the maps looked exactly as they did in 2016. And I actually ran in 2014. It was my first run. I was not successful. It was a tough year for Democrats and a tough district. So Senate District 18 in 2014 and 2016 kind of went in this weird backward C shape with some little arms and legs coming off of it from Wake Forest all the way down to Fuquay and kind of wrapped around the county. And it carved out all these more blue precincts, split precincts. I can't remember the number of split precincts I had or that I was running in 2014, but it made it incredibly difficult. It also encompassed all of Franklin County and still does. That district was going to be tough no matter who ran in it, no matter who was at the top of the ticket, no matter what was going on nationally. It was going to be a tough seat to win. Maybe if I could have talked to every single voter in 2014, and maybe if Gil Johnson, who ran in 2016, could have talked to every single voter, maybe there was a chance. But when Sydney's able to talk more about her district, I feel a lot of empathy for the area that she's in, because I got to run in that southern Wake County, Fuquay, Willow Springs area. I've family that's coming home, so you hear the dogs in the background probably. Apologies for that. But it is a very tough district. So fast forward in 2018, they had this court-ordered redraw, and what they did is they said, okay, we'll give Wake County these 4 other seats, these 4 other blue seats, but how can we configure District 18 and still make it red? And you can see exactly what they did. Franklin County is still very red, and I can talk a little bit more about that in a second. And they picked up the pretty conservative part of Wake County, which is that northwestern part of Wake that dips a little bit towards Durham there, and then carved into Raleigh, picked up John Alexander, and that's the seat that Senator Alexander ran in. And Senator Alexander is a great guy. He called me after the 2020 election, congratulated me. He's a fairly moderate Republican, but we know that they all kind of run together. So even though you might be a moderate Republican, you're still going to be voting in very conservative ways. So it doesn't really help the cause to necessarily have a moderate Republican. So in 2019, they redrew the districts again, and those new maps came out in September. And they, because of the court order, they really had to consolidate things, and they were not able to make a solidly Republican district. Now, it's a tough district. I won with 52% of the vote, despite outspending my opponent something like 400 to 1. I didn't have a very tough opponent in 2020. And I think he raised maybe $5,000. I raised something like $800,000 and spent nearly all of it. And I still only won with 52% of the vote, which gives you some idea of how competitive that district still is. So what changed? The reason I was able to flip it, I think, is twofold. One, the maps. The maps make a huge difference. When we have fairly drawn maps, we can have fair, competitive districts. And really, all of our districts should be competitive, if we're being perfectly honest. We should all be having to run tough district, talk to constituents, talk to voters about what matters most, and we're going to get a much more balanced legislature with the ability to pass common sense legislation. So the maps make a huge difference. There's also been considerable growth in the north and eastern part of Wake County, Wake Forest, Knightdale, Wendell, Zebulon, which is in the eastern part of Wake County. A huge growth, a lot of folks moving in from other states. That makes a big difference. I will say Franklin County still remains pretty conservative. I lost Franklin County by about 2,000 votes. Where I won the district was in the Wake County portion. I worked really, really hard and raised a lot of money and out-communicated my opponent. Imagine if I hadn't done those things, winning with 52, little less than 52% of the vote isn't a huge margin. There's not a lot of room for error there.
Yeah, and that's very similar, as we've seen, especially across the map. And as Sarah said about her district, is that the lines matter, right? And just a few lines or a precinct matter. I mean, so when they did the redraw, I lost 5 Democratic precincts, and those went to Representative Von Hafen and Representative Adcock. And then I got their most Republican and heavily majority Republican precincts. And one of the precincts, right, it was 1,000 Republicans and like 200 Democrats, right? So it's that type of numbers where it really does matter when we're talking about the granular nature of what these maps look like and whatnot, for sure.
Yep, absolutely. So Sydney, how, we're all waiting for the census data. We can't wait to get it. Our municipalities can't wait to get it. And we know Wake County has just grown leaps and bounds in the last 10 years. And keep in mind, these lines that were drawn in 2019 that we all had to run in 2020, those were drawn using 2010 census numbers, right? So I think we're going to see see these lines change. And I would just love to know, how do you think the census data is going to affect our Senate districts that we get to run in next year?
Yeah, not the, $100 million question. So I think for both of us, right, we live in the most Republican parts of Wake County. And so depending on how we're coupled and how we, in the redistricting process, they're going to have to pair us with the district. So we think, Sarah and I have talked, and a lot of other people, Wake County has grown, but they haven't grown enough to get another Senate district, right? So we think we're probably going to get, still within our 5-person Senate district, which means that either Sarah or myself are probably going to get the rub. The rest of the people in Wake, it's too blue for them to really do anything. And if we end up getting grouped with Harnett County, that could be very bad because Harnett County is where Senator Bergen represents. It's very conservative. But if we actually get grouped with Durham, then it makes it easier for the Wake County members. And because we're not getting a 6th seat, they can't make our districts a lot tinier, right? We're still going to have to represent. So even in the worst case scenarios, both of us, Sarah and myself will have districts that are going to be a lot more, one of them is going to be a lot more competitive. And as Sarah, you just mentioned, right, yours is at 52% anyway. And so they could both make our lives much more difficult. The District 17 was 8 points Dem, but Sam didn't win it by 8 points. And we know that in 2020, right, there was a very different feel in elections. Many of you who went and actually were at polling places in Fuquay Arena knew how, if anyone thought that Wake County was blue, all they had to do is go to Fuquay and see that it was not that way. And so I think that if those Trump voters are not emboldened, in which Sarah and I actually had this conversation today, and I know this isn't particularly on topic, but I think it's very relevant for us to understand and know, is that critical race theory. Today, Senator Berger suggested that we put in a constitutional amendment about the banning of critical race theory in schools. And he did it because they could just go ahead and pass a bill, a governor would veto it, et cetera. I think they're doing it because that's the way that they get their base excited to come out in an off year when their President Trump was not on the ballot. And so every single time, they're just maniacally amazing at how they come up with how they can rally people. And so I think that we can't take for granted, frankly, the opportunity to make sure that we're doing as much work as early as possible. And we lost, ground in not canvassing, but we also, as Democrats, wanted to save lives, right? And I can't say that if my loss was because we didn't knock on doors, but we saved lives and I didn't make people feel uncomfortable or put volunteers at risk of getting COVID, that was a loss I was willing to take, right? And so we don't know all the factors, but I do think that when we're moving into a new redraw, it's going to be really important to see who they group us with, whether it's Durham or Harnett, it's going to matter. And then Sarah, you and I are going to have harder districts regardless. But I think that both areas of Wake County, your area and mine, are the fastest growing. Mine in Southern Wake County is by far the fastest growing. I think from perspective, between now and I think June, at the end of June, we sent almost 6,000 voter letters, 6,000. And Senate District 17 and House District 37 had the highest voter participation in the state. And it also had the most registered voters. So when Sam and I went into the election night on 2020, we were representing significantly more people than any other district throughout the state, right? And those numbers are just going to continue to increase. The census has been baked in. We know what those numbers are. If they probably did the census now, Wake County would probably get another senatorial district, but it's going to actually benefit Sarah and I because we're sticking with just 5 for the next 10 years, even though we know that the growth is rapid. So 88% of my district, House District 37, had voted on election day. There were only 22% of voters left, which is outrageous, which is amazing, right? But it also shows how competitive and how engaged certain districts are compared to across the state. So I think those are some of the areas. I mean, do you think, Sarah, with regards to my district specifically growing rapidly, do you see the same type of growth and changes with regards to where you are as well?
152%. I don't know the number off the top of my head with how many new voter letters we sent, but it has been a ton. People are moving into Eastern and Northern Wake County at incredible rates. And so, yeah, I agree completely with everything that you said.
Yeah. And so oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Nope, go ahead.
I was just going to also ask you is, do you think that what I've noticed in speaking with or getting a feel of the people that are moving here when we're talking to voters or we're getting emails from constituents, I think we're also benefiting from a lot of people moving from like up north and the Midwest and not necessarily from the South or from out West, because we've been very fortunate in Wake County to actually get some of the, most popular contracts. Apple, we've had a pharmaceutical company relocate to Holly Springs in my district. We have apparently Holly Springs is the second most popular place for pharmaceutical companies to now come, right? And so Wake County, and then we had Google that came. So we have all of this growth in Wake County. And one of the challenges that I think that Sarah and I are going to have when we talk to voters, and it'll be interesting when we talk to voters this weekend, is the affordability of housing. People who have a house, it's fine. But really the question is, if you're knocking on apartment doors, if you're talking to other people that might be displaced because of 540, where we are specifically, they're really concerned because they can't afford to live. So I know that was a segue, but I thought that it was important in the context of the fact that the reason why we have more hope, frankly, and I have more hope, is that the people that are moving here might be Republicans in Jersey, but they're not North Carolina Republicans. And we have to remind them of that, right? Because in my district, most of the people are they register, and the vast majority of the district is unaffiliated voters. So we got to figure out how they feel. And when they move here, they don't know what the political winds say and how they feel. So we're trying to figure that out. We just have to remind them they're not the Southern Republican. Really a Northern Republican is a Democrat in North Carolina. That's what we're trying to tell them. It's like, we're the party of reason and not the party of extremes.
Right.
So
which is why it takes all this money and all this effort to try to win these elections, because we're communicating, and we're going to be communicating with essentially a whole new electorate. Right. And doing all of those things and reminding folks that the Republican policies we've seen in North Carolina have been really detrimental to the state. And that's not what people want. So we do have to remind them, we're not, not necessarily talking to folks who have been here a long time, who really understand the political climate. So what do you think, I've really been thinking about this a lot too, Cindy. What do you think is the timeline for redistricting? We're not going to get the numbers, I think, until after September 30th, where, we all had hoped to have a little bit of a break before we had to come back and do redistricting. I think we're just going to be working through, which is just fine, but certainly not what we expected. So what do you think is in store for us in the fall?
Yeah, I think what we're looking at, right, I think that they said that the census data will be available in September, perhaps. And so they thought it was going to be October. They said, all right, we can get it through September, even though I always was wondering, I was like, y'all have the data. It's not that hard. You literally just put out the congressional maps and who was going to get new districts. So clearly the data's there, but whatever, we're not getting it until September. So what I think will happen is that we will go through a charade of what it's supposed to look like to redistrict. And I don't think you're on redistricting committee, are you? You and I are not the unlucky souls that are. And I think that they will go ahead and some of them in leadership are attending a redistricting conference this week. Don't know what that is, but I'm pretty sure that a whole lot of Democrats probably were invited. And they'll come back and they'll have their maps. And at the end of the day, we're going to look at the fact that they're going to have to figure out to plan for 10 years, right? And one of the things that Sarah and I, Sarah, you and I might they may take advantage of is saying, we might be able to win Wake County in these districts for a cycle or two, but are we really going to be able to win them for a decade? And we know that they are amazing and maniacal, and they plan. There is nothing. They play chess. We're playing checkers. We're not even playing checkers. We're like over there just in the sandbox trying to look for some Tupperware someone left. Like that's
we're watching the game.
We're watching them play when they let us. And so I think that some of what we do and what's really important is that they have to have a long game and a strategy about what these districts are going to look like. So I think we'll come back in September. I think they'll put on a show for a dog and pony show for about a week or two, have public comment, and then they'll throw their maps out. And then Sarah and I'll be like, yeah, well, we're going to get to work. Now we're getting to work already, because I think that it's really important. And I thought somebody's point in the chat earlier was, it seems like it's really important to talk to voters, and it is. I mean, I do think that there's nothing that replaces a human body at a door talking about the importance of making sure that you know your elected officials, you have access to them, and that it's important to vote. And I think that's what Democrats do the best, and COVID helped out Republicans because we didn't do that for, one way or the other. So I think that's one of the things that we can certainly go ahead and address. I don't know if you agree or if you think there's anything else that we need to be looking out for, but we'll be there until October.
Yeah, we're definitely going to be there until October. We'll see. We'll see if we get out before November. Hopefully, some of it depends on what happens with the budget too. I mean, the budget is still up in the air. And we're not sure if we'll have a budget that gets approved or if we'll be going through a series of mini budgets. That's part of the hard thing about being in the minority, which has been a big lesson for me to learn, about, okay, my power is sustaining the governor's veto. Okay, got it. Took me a little while to realize that was the most important vote I had. And I knew it was important. I just thought there might be some other stuff that I might get to do, but get to help a lot of constituents. But yeah, I think you're exactly right. Sydney, when you talk about talking to voters, and we're starting to put our strategy together for the fall, and just get out there, and we're putting on some neighborhood office hours at some fun places like breweries and coffee shops where people come, and just trying to talk to voters and show up face to face. And I think somebody put in the chat, what are the legislative things that we could do to kind of talk to folks in rural areas. I don't know exactly the question. I've lost it in the chat now, but I don't know that there's a lot in terms of legislative things we might do. The things that are going to be important to your folks in rural areas. Susan just put it in there. Rural broadband. You took the words literally out of my mouth. Broadband is a huge one. And truly not just in the rural areas. That's a really important topic in Eastern Wake County as well. And unfortunately, the Democrats, as Sydney was saying at the beginning of this, it's hard to move legislation. You have to get the Republicans to kind of carry that water for you for a whole lot of reasons, not just what we want to happen in the Senate, but what we want to happen in the House as well. So I think the most important thing that we can do to connect with folks in our more rural areas and our suburban areas is to get together with them on one-on-one, provide excellent constituent services, communicate with them often, and then show up where they are in their communities, at their doors, at those community events, and remind people that you're a real human being. I can't tell you how many conversations I had on the doors with people. We'd be having a great conversation, and then they'd say, "Oh, well, are you a Democrat or a Republican?" I'd say, "Well, I'm a Democrat." And they go, "Oh, well," I'd say, "Now, wait a minute. Our conversation was going great. What happened?" And then they came up with all these things that they didn't like about Democrats. And I said, well, why do you think we're going to agree 100% of the time? I chose to marry my husband, and I don't agree with him 100% of the time. And when you break it down for people like that and give it to them in something real that they can relate to, they go, "Oh yeah, you're right. We're not supposed to agree 100% of the time." And when they see you as a real human being with real feelings and somebody who cares about, about their future and about their livelihood, I think that makes a real difference in our ability to win in these tougher districts.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more.
Okay. I don't know where we are in the program.
So I know one thing is that, so one of the questions that I've actually heard a lot about are what are the opportunities for expanding our electorate, right, in the district, and voter registration, turning out registered voters. So as you guys heard me say, in my district, 88% of all voters voted in the election, the 2020 election, which is outrageously high for the vast majority of districts. With that said, it's not just about registering new voters. One of the things that I don't think as the Democrats we've talked about enough is, and we've talked, you and I have talked about this ad nauseum, the Democratic Party is losing the opportunity to actually talk to people about whether or not you have an ID. It doesn't matter if we register 100,000 more people in the state of North Carolina. If they go to the ballot box and they don't have an ID, it's not going to matter. All of that energy and all of that labor that we have put into registering people will not matter because they're going to have photo ID on the books. The likelihood, and if they don't, great, but we need to act like they are. So we need to be doing our job is making sure that when we're talking to people and we have somebody in front of us say, hey, you registered to vote? Obviously, if you're at their door and you're canvassing, they are, unless somebody else answers and you're like, oh, well, you're not the person I was supposed to meet with. Did you just move to the area and are you registered to vote? So be it. But we need to talk to people about the fact that if they don't have it, one of the most important things that we can do, and what Neighbors on Call is amazing at doing, especially with regards to phone banking and canvassing, is that we not only clean up the voter reg, like the registration and the information, but we also can ask people at that time, do you have a photo ID? And if they don't, we can take their names, and then we can go ahead and make sure that there are numerous organizations out there to go ahead and connect people with the resources to help them get their photo ID. And I think that is what we really need to focus on between now and the time that we're in 2022, because it's going to be coming. It's a freight train and Democrats are going to get hit with it. And we are the ones that disproportionately do not have photo IDs. So I think that's one of the things that we certainly need to address. And one of the ways in which we can build our electorate, we can't just worry about registration. We've got to walk and chew gum at the same time. And we got to make sure that we're actually logging that information and asking them in ways in which we can help them.
Yeah, I think, gosh, what a great point. And, you know, those are conversations that we can start now. And like you said, even if voter ID is not something that we're going to have in 2022, we need to act like it is happening. It is here. It is here to stay. And we need to help people not have that barrier when they get to the polls. You're exactly right. So speaking of those conversations with voters, I think I heard or read that you all are going out this Saturday to canvass. I will tell you, Sydney, I don't know if you know this about me, but canvassing is my favorite thing to do as a candidate. I love canvassing. In fact, if I didn't have a family thing to do on this Saturday, I would come and canvass with you because I want to keep you in the Senate. I want to keep me in the Senate. I want to keep working with you. But I guess, as you think about starting to talk to voters this weekend, we're a whole more than year away, almost a year and a half away from the elections in 2022. So, how do you think, maybe besides the voter ID piece, how do you think we can lay the groundwork for success in your district by talking to voters this far in advance before the election?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this weekend we're canvassing, and so we've chosen, because we don't know what the district's going to look like, right? We're not sure. I know that Holly Springs, of which I live, it has to be in my district. So one of the things that we've done is that when I assumed the Senate seat, a lot of people don't know, right? I was appointed. I wasn't on their ballot. They didn't get mail about me. They got mail about Sam, where they knew that Sam was their, Searcy was their former senator. And so they only know, a lot of people may only know me if they even pay attention after they've gotten all that mail, because I sent a lot of mail and spent a lot of money. Sarah's like, yeah, my race is $800,000, right? Mine was $1 million. Like, these races are expensive. And so even with all that money spent, you guys know, because you've done this in your pros, you call and they're like, wait, I know I've called you 4 times. Do you remember who your representative is? And so it's really a saturation. So we're actually introducing myself as a senator to the constituents, because they knew me as Representative Batch. And in some of the areas that we're going into, they may not even know me at all because they have a different representative. So we're going to focus on going into Holly Springs and then areas in Apex, and then areas potentially around Fuquay, but mostly it's going to be Holly Springs, Apex areas. And those are going to be where Representative Von Hafen, it has the House district, so they wouldn't necessarily know that I'm there. And the key is we're not asking anyone. This is the best part. If you're new to canvassing, this is like the best type of canvass to actually do. You're not asking people for a vote. You're asking 2 things, or you're doing 2 things. One, hey, your senator is Sydney Batch. Here is information about all of the different constituent services that Sydney Batch can provide if you have any issues. And this is what her role is as a senator, X, Y, and Z. And we'll have a script. But the other thing we're asking is, what is most important to you? Because one of the things that I've worked and we've talked to, and you guys at Neighbors on Call have emphasized, is that there's no reason for us to, in any Senate district, there's a House district. In any House district, there's a Senate district. By actually canvassing for me, you're going to help whoever is in District 37 or in District 36, which is Representative Von Hafen, or Gail Adcock, because we're going to collect the information and then I'm going to share it with the representatives. So I think while we're out there and we're canvassing and we're talking to people, we want to know what their issues are, because let's be honest, polling isn't great. Anyone who answers a phone number that they don't know and then stays on a poll may not be the people that are normal, that are always going to be there. We would probably answer it because we're all engaged, politically engaged, but most people are not sitting at home waiting to answer a poll. I always say that we should go to a state employees credit union on a Friday, and that's where you're going to find out what North Carolinians really want. You talk to those individuals, because that is actually where the vast majority of people are in the state of North Carolina. But with that said, I think what we're planning to do is really talk to people in the surrounding area, where some people may know me as representative, but not know that I was necessarily appointed as a senator. And we're talking to Democratic voters and some unaffiliated voters, but with high Democratic scores. So we're not doing persuasion doors. We're not doing Republican doors. The only doors that you should get, and the only doors that we're knocking on and that I'm knocking on, I might do some persuasion doors, but I wouldn't ask for y'all to do that at this stage. It is literally going to be Democratic and unaffiliated with high voter scores is the plan.
That's great. Now, are you going to be out canvassing also?
Oh, of course. I am like you, interestingly enough. I love canvassing. I would take canvassing. If we could just canvass and never have to raise any money.
Oh my God, please.
Or have to ask somebody for money.
Sign me up.
Lord, I'd do that. I'd be so happy every day. I'd be like, oh, I'll knock for 100 doors. Or I would knock 100 doors for the one person I have to call to ask for money. But you and I are talking. We're loquacious. So naturally, anyone wants to talk to us, we're good to go. The pandemic for Sarah and I was literally a struggle because we're extreme extroverts and we only had our husbands and children to hug. So we're happy we're back into a different world where we can see people again. So I can't wait to see so many of you who might come out on Saturday, especially since it's been over a year now since the pandemic, and I can give hugs again because I'm vaccinated. It's great.
Oh, thank goodness for the vaccine, right? Oh my gosh. Yeah, I love that question about asking voters what's on your mind, what are you talking about at the dinner table? Just real casual. I love that you that's going to be incorporated this weekend, and that those are the questions you ask, because that's where you really get great information. And sometimes you get some really kind of some interesting things. I had one guy. One time I was knocking doors and I said, well, what's on your mind? What's the big issue? And he looked at me dead in the face and he said, motorcycle helmets. And I said, oh, okay. So are you for them? And he said, no, I'm against them. It ought to be my choice. I said, oh, and I just looked at him and I said, well, that's really interesting. I hear that they do a great job at saving people's lives. But, that if you have information you want to send me, feel free to send it. So sometimes you get some really, really interesting information, but it's all informative, right? That guy, that was his issue, motorcycle helmets. And so I sent him a little card and said, thanks for telling me that your issue is motorcycle helmets. Mm-hmm. And maybe he voted for me. I don't know. But I love that. So, I would love just to know, if somebody is knocking a door and they say, well, what is Senator Batch working on? Why should I care about her? Why should I care? Especially this far in advance of the election, is there any legislation that you want folks to kind of talk about while they're out on doors?
Yeah. So for those of you who have canvassed, right, my issues haven't changed, who've canvassed for me before, it's ad nauseum, but it's all the good, the good Democratic policies that we want to talk about, which I think of course, it's the access to affordable health care. For some of you who may not know, I'm a breast cancer survivor. I'm a huge proponent for making sure access to healthcare is affordable to everyone and accessible, and not just because you have junk health insurance policies. And I also believe in paid leave and paid family leave. Sarah and I are actually primary sponsors on the paid family leave bill in the Senate. They did not actually have sponsors before Sarah and I got there in the Senate. So we were the first to actually be primary sponsors for paid leave because, interestingly enough, only 12% of North Carolinians have paid leave. So what we suspect is that COVID has changed fundamentally the way that people see the world and the way that their lives are lived every day. And I think what we're going to see and the opportunities that we have, and why I'm so very grateful for anyone who plans to come and canvass on Saturday, is that this is an opportunity for us to ignore all the polling and to actually talk to the people who live in our district. Because Sarah and I have been in many meetings with people who live in DC, who are consultants, who want to tell us what our voters should care about. And I only care about what my voters care about, and that we don't get to them. The best way to get to them is by asking them in an off year, when I'm not asking for their vote, what they care about. And people will open up and pour their hearts out and talk to you about it. And so one of the things that we've done is the script is really short. It's like, hey, Sydney Batch is your senator. Here's the constituent services. By the way, what's important to you? Because she wants to hear from it. And there'll be a drop-down list of like 500 billion things that people will put on a list. What I think, and I suspect is the case, and I think for you, Sarah, if you agree, in your district as well, there'll be issues of affordable housing, right? And the fact that that's going to be an issue. Growth is an issue. I think that one of the things, getting back on policies that, I stand for, is that obviously fully funding our public schools and making sure that teachers get pay raises. Pretty much anything Democratic you're thinking about, I'm there. If anyone asks about legalizing marijuana, yeah, okay, we already have a bill in the Senate. It's not a surprise. But I think that hopefully we're talking to friendly voters. And if there's a position that you're not sure that I'm on, what I will always tell you that we'll do, which is great, is I have lots of constituent phone calls. And so I set up Zooms. I'll call them back. Sydney Dugan, who's my legislative assistant, and many of you know because she was my campaign manager, she'll call them back. So you never have to answer and say, you take a position. If they want to know what my position is, I'm more than happy to call them and tell them. That's like, and I know that Becca and Susan know that I will actually do that.
Senator Batch and Senator Crawford, I know that there are a lot of questions for you from the audience. And before we pass it over to Patience to handle those questions, I just want to remind everyone that we are canvassing on Saturday with Senator Batch. It's at 10 a.m., 10 to 12, meeting at Womble Park. All those details are on the website, and you can RSVP at neighborsoncall.org. If someone could put that in the chat, that would be great. And we also want to plug our next meeting, which is on August 11th. Representative Everett is helping us to launch a special project. It's a toolkit that can help incumbents, our Democratic incumbents in the legislature, get their own local volunteer teams up and running and their own constituent outreach programs going year round. And so after the launch event, we're going to ask you to participate in 2 phone banks, at least 2 phone banks, if you can do it, as part of a trial run where we're testing out this toolkit. So those phone banks will occur between August 15th to 29th. They're going to be really short, only about an hour of calling, and you'll have a lot more conversations because it's going to be with an auto dialer. And then at the end, we'll ask for your feedback and we will adjust the program so we can really optimize it. So putting in a plug for that, you can RSVP for the canvas on Saturday and our other canvas with Representative Furtado coming up a week later. And then for these things with Representative Everett in August. So I'll pass it over to Patience for some Q&A.
Yeah. Jennifer says, I'm concerned that the growing Latinx and Asian voter population is much more in play than stereotypes would suggest, and that those voters have a lot of social issues that play differently than they do in other minority groups. Do you have any comments about that or thoughts about that?
I think you're absolutely right about the Latinx community, for sure. I think that in my district, and Sarah can speak with hers, I have a much smaller, my district is very white, very, very white, and it's getting whiter by the day. I have, with some parts of Cary, I'm going to have a larger AAPI community, which is great. And I've actually met with them already, and they did an amazing amount of registering voters and getting engaged, but they also have been more aligned with Democratic values because they've seen a lot of the issues of hate crimes and the rioting bills and other things as what they perceive as an affront to them being brown in America. So I think we have opportunities in both of those communities to really talk to people at a different level. Sarah, I don't know if you have a higher percentage of, I think you have a higher percentage of Latino Latinx members, right?
Yeah, slightly, but my district is it's fairly small when it comes to other minoritized populations. So it's about 27% right now. It's about 27% African American, very white other than that, and a very, very tiny percentage API and Latinx, maybe slightly higher on Latinx. But, you know, I agree completely with you, Cindy, on making sure that we're paying attention to the issues in those communities and having real conversations and real dialogue. And I agree. I've had some conversations as you have as well, you know, and agree with everything you said that, you know, their priorities tend to skew more on the Democratic side because they have been victims or know people who have been victims of hate crimes. And so we've been having those conversations with constituents, but it is a fairly small percentage in the district. And you know, we'll have to see after the lines get redrawn how that changes, but we should be paying attention to that in our districts to the extent that it plays a role, and obviously more broadly.
Okay. You talked a little bit about expanding the electorate in your districts, and Judith wants to know if you have trouble identifying people who have recently moved into your, you know, renters, for instance, into your district who haven't yet registered. How do you find those people?
It's a really good question. I think what the conversations that I've at least had with some members of the Democratic Party, you know, they've had a leadership change, is that that's the issue, that there are a lot of other outside grassroots groups, including, you know, Amy Steele's working along with trying to register voters and identify where those are. So there are a lot of smart people that are trying to figure out, especially with regards to apartment complexes, if you just moved in, how you register to vote. What I would suggest is that at some point, because we have enough people that are already voting that we need to communicate with, is that there's nothing that stops any of us from hanging information, right? Or knocking on doors and saying, are you registered to vote? Sometimes that's unsafe for some people, right? Like there are other organizations. So I think it's important for us to just partner with organizations to identify those opportunities where we can find more people who aren't registered. If I understood the question correctly, patient.
Okay. This is a question that was sent in to us. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on with the budget process? And are there any particular budget issues that are significant for Wake County that your constituents will recognize and care about?
Sarah. Sarah and I were angry the entire budget process. The way to sum it up is we were not included. Democrats, even though they asked us to send them our top priorities, we as Democrats didn't believe that any district deserved more or less because of who represents them. We actually asked for things that would actually change the dynamic and fabric of the entire state and all constituents. So we didn't ask for earmarked money. We didn't go ahead and try and get a lot of pork in the budget. As a result, we were also ignored. And there are some Democrats that voted for the budget when it moved out of the Senate. Sarah and I did not. We think it was a horrible budget. And when you leave $2 billion on the table and you refuse to actually fund our schools, despite the fact that we have a Leandro lawsuit for 20 years now that says what we were supposed to do, and we have the money to do a whole lot, we just did not in good conscience feel like we could vote for it. So now it's in the House, it's moving through there. It'll get better because the House likes to spend more money and the Senate doesn't. And then it'll hopefully go to conference. What do you think? Anything I missed, Sarah?
You know, no, nothing you missed. I'll just add to that, you know, once it goes to conference, that'll be really where the proof is to see if the Republicans are willing to negotiate. The governor's made it very clear that he is very willing to negotiate with the Republicans, and he's made it clear to us that really everything is on the table. He really wants Medicaid expansion. The Republicans really want corporate tax cuts. It means we're going to have to, if we want to get everything that we want, we're going to have to compromise and maybe take a few things that we wouldn't want, and hopefully, knock on wood, fix it down the road when we have Democratic majorities. You know, and so the proof is going to be in the conference piece. Now, if the Republicans do not emerge with a compromised budget that the governor can stand behind, governor's going to veto that budget. And I do think that we should be able to sustain the governor's veto. And if that happens, we're going to see a series of mini budgets. I think that's still a real possibility. I don't think it's a possibility that anybody wants, because then a lot of people lose out. Teachers lose out. Our direct care workers lose out. A lot of people lose out if we do a series of mini budgets, because there will be a lot of priorities that don't get taken up. When it comes to things that are important for Wake County, I think talking about our public schools, I think talking about investments in infrastructure are all really important for Wake County, considering the growth we have, considering the number of families we have in the area, moving into the area. And I think those are the things that we should be really talking about in big ways in Wake County.
Okay. A couple of folks have really taken to heart your comment that we should act like photo ID is on the books, and they're wondering whether there's a website or an organization or what resource you would recommend to them to learn more about how to help folks get a photo ID. And remember, some of our volunteers are from out of state.
Oh, great. So the great question. What I will do is make sure that Sydney Dugan and I talked to a group of individuals from Black Voters Matter, and they actually have paired up with another organization that's helping pay and assist, so that when Black Voters Matter goes, registers a voter, they say, hey, you don't have a photo ID. They pair them with this one organization that's helping them. So what we'll do is I'll just make sure, patients, that I send the information to you all so that you can disseminate it to the larger group, to make sure that we are actually identifying those individuals and then ensuring later on that they actually get the photo IDs.
Okay, great.
And Sydney Dugan, you're still on here, hopefully, so you've listened to that and will remind me of the many things that you need to remind me.
Okay. And I know we're nearing an end here, so I want to ask you, Senator Batch, one last question. Can you tell us about a bill that you proposed this session that you're really proud of, even though you knew it was dead on arrival and won't have a chance of passing until we get more Democrats elected to the legislature?
Paid family leave, hands down. That, I think, is by far will change. The paid family leave bill that I filed is for part-time, full-time employees. Anyone that is employed would actually be able to take paid family leave up to 12 weeks. And it does not require, and it requires every single person to pay into the system, which is the reason why it would be successful. So I think that after COVID, with the amount of individuals, especially parents, that had to leave work, take care of loved ones, and we've seen 3 million women leave the workforce, people. Like 3 million women have left the workforce. And they believe that COVID has actually set women back generations now, 1 or 2 generations, because all of the gains that we have made have been lost in the last year, because many of us had to bear the brunt of being able to take care of loved ones who were sick and our children when they couldn't go to school. And so I think that and I live in suburbia, like it's Wisteria Lane and Desperate Housewife land sometimes, guys. So I think that for them and for those individuals who understand that impact, I think that they really would care about paid leave. Now, for those of the people, I probably have a disproportionate amount of individuals who live in these really nice houses and probably have paid leave. But for the other regular, everyday working Americans, I think that is the one thing outside of Medicaid expansion that will fundamentally change people's lives in the state of North Carolina. And that won't change until we get Democrats in the majority.
Okay. Thanks so much. Becca, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, patients. Thank you very much, senators. And thank you to everybody who's here tonight to hear about this and signing up for canvases and phone banks. And we just really appreciate that you're ready to jump in right now. It is definitely not too early. So thank you, everybody. And we will see you again Saturday, the following Saturday, and then August 11th. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Hope to see you Saturday.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.